Hi everybody, I'm Chase Sanborn, and on this channel I share things that I've learned in more than 40 years as a professional jazz trumpet player. This video is to introduce and give you a little bit of background on the Jazz History series on this channel. The videos in this series are based on a university course that I taught for the last 10 years. When all the teaching went online last year, I scrambled to convert an in-person PowerPoint presentation to video. So what you see in these is a little different than the other videos on this channel in that they weren't purpose-built for the medium, and they had to be done pretty fast, often just in time to post for the next class. So the production is not up to Ken Burns standards, but there are a couple of things that maybe makes this presentation a little different than others. One is that I'm coming at it from the perspective of a jazz musician, not a filmmaker or a historian or a sociologist, and I'll speak to that a little bit more in a minute. Also, the presentation is targeted at jazz students, not the general public. And with that in mind, I tend to include full-length audio-video cuts rather than snippets. Now, that's something I couldn't do in person given the time constraints and knowing that the viewer has the ability to skip ahead. But if you really want insight into the musical progression, you've got to hear the music, not just somebody talking about it. Now, this is actually the second time that I'm running this series, so some of you may have already seen some of the videos. But few will have seen them all because I posted them one at a time, with each one replacing the previous one. A lot of people discovered the series along the way, and I had more than a few disappointed comments that previous episodes were no longer available. I did it that way, in part because I didn't want to put my whole course online while I was still teaching it. I wanted my university students to focus on the videos that we'd be discussing that week in class. Well, I've now stepped away from teaching the course, so I'm okay with leaving all the episodes up once they're posted. But there is a cautionary note. Unlike the other videos on my channel, there's a lot of content here that I don't own the rights to. Most of the clips can be found elsewhere on YouTube, so you could look at this as a curated collection with my own narrative added. As I posted the videos individually, most of them garnered one or more copyright claims. Now that's different than a copyright strike, which can lead to a channel being taken down. With a copyright claim, the video can't be monetized, and I'm fine with that because my goal is to share the content, not to make money off somebody else's intellectual property. Now, I don't know whether having all the episodes up increases the chances that one of them will actually get a copyright strike. And if that happens, I guess I'll take the whole series down, because my primary focus on this channel is to produce original content, largely geared towards aspiring musicians. Now that said, if you want a deeper understanding of jazz in the 21st century, whether you're a player or a listener, you need to go back to the beginning of the 20th century to understand how it evolved. Now, as I mentioned at the outset, my perspective and expertise is that of a jazz musician. So my focus is on the music and the lives of the musicians who made it, rather than the sociology that surrounds it. But you can't present the history of jazz without including some aspects of what was going on in the world at the time that the music was made. That includes the First World War and the shutting down of Storyville in New Orleans, which forced jazz musicians to migrate in search of work, taking the music with them. The Roaring Twenties, which was the first full decade of recorded jazz. It was an exuberant time period packed with technological advances set against the backdrop and the backlash of Prohibition. Jazz was a very prominent musical soundtrack to that era, to the point that the decade is also referred to as the Jazz Age. The Great Depression of the 1930s, when people danced to swing music to escape their economic misery, and jazz enjoyed its one and only stint as the popular music of the day. World War II, when many jazz musicians wound up in the military and some wound up dead or emotionally wounded. The absence of men gone to war also provided an opportunity for female jazz musicians, who are substantially underrepresented in jazz history, and especially early jazz history, due to lack of opportunity and misplaced expectations. The 1940s, when bebop musicians rebelled against the commercialization and cultural appropriation of the music. As described by Thelonious Monk, they wanted a music that would be hard to steal. The post-war boom in the 1950s, which gave rise to many new jazz styles and which some people would describe as the most important decade in jazz. I'd agree with that, perhaps in conjunction with the 1920s. The 1960s, when the push for civil rights crossed paths with widespread opposition to the Vietnam War and the prevalent fear of nuclear annihilation, with daily scenes of violent protests and assassinations. Some of the music from that era can be seen as reflective of a turbulent social climate. The 1970s, when Miles Davis led the way towards what was first called jazz rock and then fusion, incorporating rhythms and styles from the rock world and the emergent use of the synthesizer, which forever changed the musical landscape. Now that's actually where this course concludes, which is certainly not to say that's the end of jazz history. I framed this course from about 1900 to 1970 because I felt that's what I could adequately cover in 2 terms. Now there are still many great jazz musicians from that time period who are not covered, but I tried to focus on those who had a substantial impact on the evolution of the music as a whole. Considering that more than 50 years have passed, clearly there's more to the story, and I leave it to others to tackle that significant and ongoing segment of jazz history. Now what about the term jazz? It's an undeniable fact that this music originated, in the main, with Black Americans, and Black history is intertwined with jazz history. Some argue that the music is more appropriately called Black American music, or other alternatives to the word jazz, which may be seen as musically restrictive or culturally oppressive. That point of view goes back at least as far as Duke Ellington, who said it was a mistake to call the music jazz, but that it was too late to change it, even then. Over the course of 100+ years, the music that is still most commonly referred to as jazz has become a multifaceted, multiracial, and multicultural playing field. But we do well to learn where it came from and to acknowledge that in many cases it was, and still is, created by people who give the world more than the world gives them. And that's probably true of art in general. My goal in posting these videos is to share what I love and what I've learned about a music that has given passion and purpose to my life. In watching them, you'll probably learn some things that you didn't know, and you'll hear some music that you've never heard. Those are worthy pursuits, and you don't even have to pay tuition, although it's always appreciated if you click the like button for this video and any video that gives you value. If you're watching this in real time, the series will commence very soon. If it's after the fact, then we're already underway, and up here you'll see a couple of suggestions for where to start. There's a whole lot of good stuff for you to explore here and elsewhere on this channel. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.